Hey John, how you doing?
Hey, very good, Ryan. Nice to be here. You well?
Nice, nice, nice. So, for some context for you if you're watching, John reached out to me because he's doing something really interesting with Get Leads. He's finding people that he would have otherwise never been able to find, and that's only really possible because of our unlimited pricing model and the fact that you use Get Leads within your AI agent. So, not on our website, actually within your AI agent. So, keen to hear a bit more about this. So, John, could you add a couple more details to what I said?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, thanks, Ryan. So I do outreach mainly for the events business. That's selling sponsorships, delegate tickets, that kind of thing. And yeah, a big part of our recent success, I would say, on response rate has been using Get Leads and this kind of novel approach that I'm going to share. And I put up here some of the logos, some of the job titles who've given us a positive response in the last 30 days.
Oh wow.
And yeah, and some pretty big brands there, right?
Okay, so wow. So sorry, I actually thought that when you showed me this earlier that this was just the job titles that you'd identified, but you're actually getting responses from OpenAI, Google, Nvidia, Stripe, JP Morgan, Adidas, Pinterest, Vercel. That that's BBC. That's pretty good. That is pretty, pretty
Yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. We're into like trillions and trillions of dollars worth of value, right, in these
Yeah.
companies, and yeah, and they've all replied. And I think what's kind of interesting, what we'll do a bit of a deeper dive into is when we look at those job titles, many of them you would have found through a regular job title keyword search, but I think others are much more niche and you wouldn't have come across them otherwise without the approach that we're going to dig into.
Yeah, like I can see here lead client partner.
Yeah.
That's, I wouldn't think to search that necessarily. Like at the BBC as well, SVP performance global markets, that's not it's not like, for example, at the Telegraph, director of product marketing, that I can completely see. That would come up, but some of these other ones,
Mhm.
yeah, never.
They're pretty interesting, right? And anyone who does a lot of list building, you realize that if you are reaching out to the likes of Nvidia, the likes of the BBC, you're going to get thousands of people coming back, right? And we can't
Yeah,
reach out
yeah.
to thousands of people. We have to be selective about who we choose.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is what the approach does. Do you want me to tell you how it works?
Please.
Yeah, cool. So essentially what we do and what I've wanted to do for a while, but it's always been prohibitive from a cost perspective, is to pull the roster from a company, run it through the LLM, and then pick out the, let's say, the top 10 likely
Mm,
contacts from that list. So let's look at OpenAI, for example, right? Let's say they may have how many? 3,000, 5,000 people working there, right?
yeah.
Several hundred across the engineering department. So we can't reach out to several hundred people, right?
Yeah, for
So
sure.
what we're looking to do is it actually starts with a keyword search, right? So we put in a very broad range of job titles, right? Maybe 100 job titles perhaps, right?
Wow.
That will then filter it down to several hundred people at
Mm.
OpenAI. We then run those through a very cheap LLM,
Yeah, makes
Quen.
sense.
You could use this. And the prompt that we're giving it is basically saying, this is what we are selling, right? So this is the event, right, that we want to invite these people to. Find the top 10 people based on their job title, their location, and their LinkedIn description, which you guys have. And that's often one of the most interesting points
Yeah.
because people put stuff in their description that often doesn't tally that neatly with the job title. So we're reading through all of it, and then Quen is kind of crunching that in the background and saying to us, right, we're going to pick this person because in their LinkedIn profile, they talk about, event marketing or whatever it is, right? That is relevant to us.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I love what you're doing is I think people when they think unlimited data, they think, great, I can send a really high volume, but actually we've been so um we've been so used to thinking about leads as this scarce resource per credit that you don't realize that actually you want to be reasoning with all the data. So you might pull out. That's a good question, actually. How many do you know roughly? Like, let's say if you pull out 100 job titles, how many you end up keeping?
Mhm. Yeah, it's so the way I've set the agent to work is for each list that I'm building, I'll give it the profile and give it the thing that we're selling as well. I'll give it the top N, so top five, top 10.
Okay, nice.
Typically never go higher than 10 per company. Um, and then what it does in the background, it will, yeah, pull out the entire list, run through them,
Smart.
score each of them that it's picked, and then have a reasoning as well. So if I get a CV at the CSV at the end of it, and that will give me the score. So it'll say this person's a 5 out of 5, and this is why
Yeah, that
they're a
makes
5 out of
sense.
5. So then at the end of it, what we can do is let's say we get way more data back than we can like reasonably address, right? We might get, tens and tens of thousands that are scored two and above. We can just cut the twos and just focus on the people who scored three, four, five, for
Yeah, that makes
example.
sense. Yeah, and one thing that I think is really interesting what you're doing is quite often people are so used as well to using like Clay, which is a great tool. But if you want to do any reasoning with an LLM, it's you have like a table, and generally the AI will check one row, which is one contact.
Mm,
What you're doing is actually simulating how a account-based marketer would actually work. You would look at the entire company, you'd look at the entire decision-making tree, you'd map it out, and then you would make your decision based on, maybe even hundreds of rows
mhm,
comparatively to just one row. So what you're actually doing is, it's really sophisticated in actually actually mapping out the process that a highly technical SDR would take,
mhm,
but actually
mhm.
doing it at scale with an LLM, like which is just is really cool.
Exactly that, right? So imagine you were looking to reach out to Stripe and you go to their LinkedIn people page, you see all these people. If you were doing it as a, caveman, right, you would scroll through one by one and look at them all, right? Um, and essentially we are just replicating that process, just running them all through this this kind of super cheap LLM. So talk a little bit about that. So the one that I've settled on is Quen, right? I think
Nice. Yeah.
it's one of the Chinese ones. And I tested like 10 different ones. I went to OpenRouter and
Yeah.
said, look, go out and run some tests. And what came back at the end was actually, look, Quen does it like really good. It's just and it's dirt cheap. So to give you an idea of the numbers, to run 250,000 contacts through this, it costs me $5,
Wow.
right?
Yeah. Okay. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
And that's
It's
like API costs, I assume. Not even
yeah,
like how, with Claude and OpenAI, you can use subscriptions, which are massively discounted. Even at the API cost level, it's way cheaper.
correct. Oh yeah, exactly. It's much cheaper to use the API costs rather than putting it into your Claude tokens, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Nice. Nice. Okay, cool. And I guess for someone who's listening, are you running this in like code, or like is this, how does this work? Because I can imagine someone is going, great, yep, this all makes sense. But how is this like, I don't know, is it just a skill that runs? Is it, yeah, like, could you, like, what do you log in to do this? Like, how does it work?
Yeah, it's a skill. It's a skill. So
Oh wow.
it's a Claude skill,
Oh,
and
so the whole
yeah,
thing can be done with
mm,
just a Claude skill.
just with the Claude skill. Exactly. So
That is
The Claude skill.
wild.
Yeah. So the Claude skill is um yeah, like trained on your API, your MCP, right?
Yeah.
It's figured out all the different
Yeah. So it knows get
nuances of
leads.
it. Yeah, it knows get leads, it knows yeah, how it all works. It obviously knows Open Router, which is very simple for it. And then basically how I work it is go into go into Claude, say, right, we want to do a people search, bring up my skill. I then give it the ICP, set the parameters, like the top N, what am I looking for? So I press enter, go and do something else, right? Because it does take a few hours to run.
Yeah.
Fine, right? You know,
A quarter of a
it's
million's
okay.
fine.
Yeah, just let it do its thing. Come back from time to time. It does need a little bit of babysitting, I'll be honest, but every
Yeah.
time it runs, you can improve it, right? You can come back and you can
Yeah.
tell it to do a review.
Yeah,
So each
that is so cool. And look, for anyone who's listening who doesn't know what a Claude skill is, essentially it's a really detailed reusable prompt that explains context and instructions to an LLM so that you can have it reliably conduct like a workflow for something. So you can say, hey, use this skill to in this context. So what John is doing, he's now made this skill, and maybe for those of you that are listening, you could get Claude to listen to the transcript and ask it to make a skill. Um, See if, but what John, he's made this skill, and now anytime he wants to use this, he literally just says, "Hey, use the skill," and I'm sure you've given it a skill name, and he can just execute that entire workflow.
that's it. Yep, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. And every time you run it, as I said, I think the great thing about having an agent running this rather than it being like a prescriptive uh, code is it can each ICP might bring back something slightly different, right? So
Right.
depending
Yeah.
on the depending on the types of companies we're targeting, large, small, it will learn something new about the get leads data set every time. And it'll be like, actually, normally I would run it this way, but I've discovered something new. So
Yeah. It can have that little
I'm gonna
judgment. Yeah. That's really cool.
ex exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
And I
Yeah,
think, a lot of people think about these things as, look, I can't code myself. People think, oh, it's not in code. The benefit is that someone who can't code can do it. But actually, as you said, there's these kind of like self-improving loops or minor judgments that it can make when it's not in code, whereas code can be quite rigid. It will just execute things. But in the skill, you put context. Look, this is what the goal we're trying to achieve. This is why, certain decisions have been made. And so it can course correct, which is really cool.
exactly that, exactly that. Yeah, and I know just on a wider point for anybody who's thinking about putting a skill together like this, set up a self-learning loop as well. So whenever it runs, just launch the self-learning loop
And
and just
what does that mean? Launch the
yeah,
self.
so it'll go
Yeah.
yeah, so it'll go back through the it's essentially another workflow that analyzes the transcript of what's just happened. So it'll then run through it and say like, did it make any incorrect API calls to get
Yeah.
leads, right? Or did the data come back in a way that it hadn't seen before? And then it
In-
will rewrite
Interesting.
the skill. So the
Yeah.
next time you run it, it gets
And
better and better.
and how does someone do that? Do you literally just say, "I want you to do a loop, a self-evaluation loop," or like how do you make that happen?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean,
Fantastic.
I like more or less. Yeah, the way I do it is I tell it to write a plan to hand off to another agent. So
Mm.
I think there are probably other maybe better ways to do that, but that's how I do it.
See, this is the thing. Like, I think a lot of people. who are not classically trained in coding get quite worried about, oh, what if I'm not following the best practices? What if I'm not doing the right thing? But ultimately, if you really just apply your common sense, you can say, oh, you know what? Every time this runs, I think we should do a reflection to see what we need to improve. And you just write that. And as long as you can communicate your ideas clearly, then what previously is a really intimidating space actually becomes really empowering because you realize, hang on, I can just say to do these things. I can ask, hey, like, I don't really understand what's going on. Could you do a reflection and explain it to me in simple terms? Um,
Hmm.
and you can get really far with that. So look, John, I thought this was going to be a 5 minute conversation, but this was really interesting. I had to keep digging. Is there
You're
anything
welcome.
else on here that that we've not spoken about that you think if you were going to try to set this up yourself again that you'd want to know in advance, or have we covered it all?
Yeah, I think we've covered it, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of the results speak for themselves, right?
I mean,
The
yeah.
the replies are coming in thick and fast. And I think one thing that we can do with this is find people who probably aren't getting a lot of outreach
Yes.
already,
Yeah, I bet.
right?
I bet.
So yeah,
Like
that's yeah.
if we look, sorry, if we just look on screen here, lead AI deployment engineer, I'd say if you know what you're doing, that's probably a fairly common one. But the Google one,
Hmm.
distinguished engineer, office of the CTO, that's not, there isn't a job title field for that. Um, if we look again, lead client partner, just literally a head title of corporate development, chief technology innovation and portfolio officer, manager, ops, GTM, M&A, and partnerships. All of these like they don't fit nicely into a category that you just think of. Um, and that's really why I think they're probably not coming up in
Hmm.
other people's searches. And if they are, they're probably coming up where people are only using seniority to
Yeah.
um to filter. So they're either getting less or at the worst, sorry, yeah, or less quality emails are coming through. So I think yeah, this is
It's
this this
yeah.
is great.
I think something you touched on earlier on is about data volume, right? So having like, how many leads do you guys have? How many hundreds of millions? It's a
Yeah.
it's a big number, right?
Yeah.
But the that in itself, you need to be able to filter it down, right? And find the
Yeah.
nuggets, right? So like having the universe there is step one, but then being able to pull out the nuggets is, I think, where the value comes from
For
having
sure.
having this. And you
For
couldn't
sure.
do it if it wasn't all you can eat, right? So that's
Yeah.
the
Yeah, yeah. No, that's so cool. And like from like my perspective, when you have such a big database, to make it financially viable, you need to create filters. And we do offer lots and lots of filters more than anyone else. But ultimately, they're the filters that we've decided
mm,
that are optimal for how to query our database. Whereas when you're pulling it out and using an LLM like you have, you can literally say, for this exact specific reason that I'm reaching out, um, what like is this job title a good fit or which of these job titles is the best fit, and there is literally no, it doesn't get better than that.
it doesn't. And there's actually one other thing that I haven't touched on. So these are all large organizations that we're looking at. A lot of your target are much smaller. They might be, 10 to 100 heads.
Yeah.
But one thing that I've done is given instructions to the skill is say to it, right, if you're targeting a small company, you might be going after founder, CEO, for example, right?
Mm,
If you're targeting a larger company, it's going to be a much more niche role. In the middle, it might be VPs, and then it can use that context, right? So it's
yeah.
it's making its assessment based on the size of the organization, which is exactly what you would do,
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
were if you were looking at the LinkedIn roster, right? You're
Exactly.
not
That's
just gonna
exactly what I was thinking about. Just about to say that the value is the learn experience of what matters. You only understand these things once you've been in the industry. So if you're like a sales rep listening to this, this is amazing for you because so few people have spent the hard graft, like spend the hours finding out in which scenario does what happen. Like, yeah, when it's smaller companies, you probably want to go a bit broader because roles are spread. They do more. Bigger companies do more, and you can, if you can say it, you can put it into a skill and package it up. So, yeah, this was great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you jumping on. I think this is going to inspire a lot of people to get some great outreach done.
Yeah, I hope so. Hope so. Thanks for having me, Ryan.
Cheers, John.
Cheers.